Hi everybody, I'm from Alessandro Lonero. Welcome to the 7th PerformanceQuest episode. Hi to my co-host, as always, Francesco Cuzzolin. And let me introduce, hi Francesco, and let me introduce Elena Araldi, our guest for today. Elena is a biologist, so is a nutritionist, and with a PhD in molecular medicine. And from 2020, part of the ASICS team frontrunner Italia. Welcome. If you want to introduce yourself with some other words, thanks to be here.
Thank you, Alessandro. Thank you, Francesco, for having invited me here today. I'm glad to be here with you. And yes, I am a biologist by training, but I am also a marathoner. So I am a nutritionist, and I love to do this kind of job, working with the athletes, but also with the normal people, in order to get them to sport and to a healthy life. So thank you so much for having invited me here today.
No, thank you, Elena. I'm really, really happy to have you on board. I don't know if already Alessandro told you something, but you are our first female guest. So you know you got a great responsibility. Now I'm really happy. And first of all, you are the first one talking about nutrition, sport nutrition. So tonight we gotta, start this huge topic. So for sure, won't be enough just one episode, but we have so many questions from coaches from all over, let's say, the world, that we want to start, talking about some topics, some approaches, and so I'm going straight to my first question, because is the one that I'm really take care about. And before talking about nutrition, I would like to talk about how to measure body composition, because in the last years, body composition has become a very important asset in evaluating athletes. And I think you all agree that any training program at any level needs a well-designed nutrition plan.
Absolutely.
So which are the main mistakes that your experience are frequently done in reading a body composition report?
So the very first mistake usually is to link personal health to numbers read on a scale, because our body is composed by different type of structures, and body composition analysis allow you to identify which are the structures you have to work on more. So basically, we are made of different things, but the main things we can appreciate evaluating body composition are basically fat mass, free fat mass, and liquids. And liquids are very important because there are different compartments in our body. So we have the intracellular liquids and the extracellular ones. And these are very different because the first, so the total body water, let's say, is linked to the percentage of free fat mass. So it's not linked to fat. The other compartment, which is the extracellular water, is mainly linked with the inflammation, let's say. So it is a really good parameter to evaluate when you have some athletes or person doing sports which have a higher value, and maybe this value can enhance a state of inflammation or overload of some kind of foods and something like that. Then you have the fat mass, which is everything which is not the free fat mass, let's say. So fat is fat, but we have different types of fat. So you have the subcutaneous one and the visceral one. Mainly coaches and people focus on the subcutaneous fat, which actually is that part linked mainly with an improvement in cardiovascular status. The bad fat mass is the visceral one. and an overload or high values of visceral fat mass can take the person to have a higher risk of cardiovascular disorders, metabolic disease, dyslipidemia, hypertension, and so on. This is the reason why a few years ago, in 2014, if I'm correct, a paper presented for the first time the term inflammabesity, so the link between inflammation and obesity. This is because fat tissue is a tissue itself which can promote the secretion of hormones, let's say. And for doing this, this kind of tissue needs a vascular structure. So the more vascular structure you need, the more the blood pressure is high. And this is the reason why the visceral fat mass links mainly to the higher risk of cardiovascular disorder due to the high variation, insulin resistance, and so on. So this is the reason why the term inflammabesity has born.
Let me ask you something more, because it's very interesting what you say. Is it possible to find an athlete that looks like skinny? I mean, not with a high percentage of subcutaneous body fat, but if you check his body composition, you can find a lot of fat intravisceral. So it's like a fake skinny athlete. Let me say it.
It's the skin fat.
Exactly. Is it possible?
Yeah. It's very common, for example, for CrossFit athletes, in particular for CrossFit athletes who are not elite. Because in that kind of sport, you have a metabolic conditioning linked to part of weightlifting, powerlifting, and strength, and the gymnastic part. So it's very complex. Yeah, but in that kind of performance, if you are not used to balance your nutrition, which is at the very first step of the CrossFit pyramid, you can lose the focus, lose the point, and you can get a physical structure where you are skin, but with a fat mass higher than normal. And this is the skinny fat solution.
Okay, interesting, very interesting. What about the intramuscular adipose tissue?
This is a very tricky point, because in particular for inactive people, the intramuscular adipose tissue, when you get older, can promote the onset of sarcopenia and of osteoporosis and so on, in particular in female people, because during the menopause, the estrogen levels are lower, and this prompts to an accumulation of fat tissue, also intramuscular fat tissue, and to the leakage of the skeletal structure. So it's a very tricky point.
So it's worth, to assess the intramuscular adipose tissue also with athletes. So are these, let's say, body fats reacting differently from, training, nutrition, healthy lifestyle, or are more or less balanced? So when you test all of them one time, the first time they're reacting, more or less in the same way?
They are balanced if you get constant physical activity. So if you are used to train all week long, you can measure that value once, and then, every 3-6 months, depending on the single person. This is very important, because in nutrition, it's not worth to generalize, because each person is a single person to be evaluated. So you can measure the intracellular fat mass, let's say, once, and then after 3-6 months. But you can have an athlete which needs to be followed up more strictly. So it's very personal. But usually that kind of structure is balanced. So
Interesting, very interesting.
In a single person.
Very interesting. So, so the first, let's say, take-home message is if you have the chance to get the body composition with your athletes, do it, because the amount of information that you can get are all of them very, very important, for a proper training process. So I think this should be the first tip that we give to our listeners. So let's move for a while to another topic that is always a very common between strength conditioning coaches. And it's common for sport athletes, for example, the protein intake. So many athletes are looking to have a proper protein intake, but they don't put the same attention on their nutrition. So either something that should be done in advance before considering which is the proper protein intake, so we can help coaches, to have a proper relationship with their athletes.
So all we people doing sports are focused mainly on proteins when we talk about training and nutrition. And the word is plenty of people which took supplements, so whey proteins, BCA, and so on. I do strongly prefer to suggest nutrition, first of all. And the protein intake depends on the kind of activity you're doing. So let's say that for an inactive person, the proper protein intake should be of more or less 0.8 grams each kilograms of body weight. But it depends if you are an endurance athlete or an athlete who does team sports, or let's say powerlifting, weightlifting, and so on. So for an athlete who does endurance, ultra endurance, triathlon, marathons, and so on, the proper amount of protein should be 1.2, 1.4 grams each kilogram of body weight. If we talk about strength sports, so powerlifting and so on, you should get more or less 1.7, 1.8. But this kind of intake varies a lot in dependence of what are you doing. If you are just training or if you have a performance to prepare. So this is to be strictly evaluated with someone who are following up with you regarding this, so a nutritionist or your coach.
Yeah, one of the main problems, I don't know if Alessandro is agreeing with me, for physical coaches, is that we can control somehow what's happening, in the locker room right after practice, but we cannot control our athletes at home.
Outside.
So it's easier in somehow, to provide a certain amount of proteins in a milkshake or a protein shake right after practice. But I don't know if you are agree with me. If you have not a clear and a strong nutrition plan, a protein supplementation, a protein, after practice, a protein intake can be as much quality as possible. Is never enough.
Yeah, I do strictly agree. I am a lover of real food, so I really do prefer to eat rather than to take supplements. Then I suggest supplements when you know that in that particular day you will not be able to reach your daily intake. Let's say if I have to go work, I train at 6 a.m. in the morning, I have not time to do a good breakfast. Okay, so I get my shake, my protein shake with 20 grams of proteins, 20, 30, depends. I'm a female, so for me it's 20 grams. And then I know that during the day I will reach my intake, my daily intake with lunch and dinner. But I do not use each day the protein shake. So I strongly agree with you regarding this. And also few coaches and athletes completely ignore the impact of carbohydrates on performance. Mm-hmm. This is really important in endurance sports but also in basketball, in team sports, in CrossFit, in powerlifting, because the interval training activities and team sports, where you have to do your job with other guys, you have mainly 5 minutes working, 5 minutes off, so 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off. And your body uses different kinds of engine. So if you do an effort in few minutes, you mainly use carbohydrates. If that effort lasts 4 hours, and this is what it takes place when you do a marathon or a triathlon or ultramarathon and so on, you have to mix the engine. So you have to use both carbohydrates and fats. So it strongly depends on the performance you want to get.
Yeah. Very interesting. Another very important issue that many coaches have with their athletes in when the season starts, for example, that you got athletes that are coming in training camp overweight. And you don't know how to manage them, because you can reduce the amount of training, so you can reduce the training load, because most of the time is also dangerous, because it's the beginning of the season, they have to practice, it's training camp. So during the training camp, usually we practice more than normally. And you got to find a way to get back your, let's say, in shape weight as soon as possible, because coaches are complaining. And in your opinion, your experience, what can we do, to manage a body fat reduction without compromising, training too much or nutrition too much? Because in any case, they have to practice,
Yeah, the first thing to reduce body fat is basically to do a calorie reduction, but mainly 100, 200 per day, not so much. The gold standard for me is to maintain a high protein intake, maybe higher than that you need. So if you need normally 1.8, you can get to 2.2, for example. And then to lower the intake of fats, in particular saturated fatty acids, and maybe later on we can deepen this point, and to balance your intake of calories during the day. So what I suggest is to have a plate. Do you remember the Harvard healthy plate? It's a plate divided in 4 parts. You have protein. Okay. You have to imagine to have a plate divided in 4 parts, where the 2 bigger parts are vegetables and proteins, and the other 2, the smaller ones, are carbohydrates and fats. Okay. The higher parts, so proteins and vegetables and so on, should be always very high in amounts. The other 2 have to be balanced. So if you have higher carbs, you should lower fats, and so on. This is one simple way, without doing strange things in kitchen, to find a balance.
Yeah, because you can find athletes, for example, that feel embarrassed and stop eating, and so they risk injuries in few weeks. Because they are messing up nutrition and training. So I'm really agree with you. What you say is, I think, a smart approach to help the athletes to get back in shape without losing a training potential. That is important. But you have mentioned also fats, and consuming fat has been blamed on sports and healthy nutrition for years. So now we know that our bodies need fat, good fat. So which are the must-have ones, in your opinion, and which kind of attention we should follow? There are some risks to consider. Can we eat any kind of fat, or what?
It depends. It depends. Fats are important for an athlete. In particular, if we think about people doing marathons, triathlons and so on, because when you have a performance lasting more than 1 to 3 hours, your body needs fats. So 1 molecule of fat gives you 9 kilocalories, and this is platinum for the body. So fats are really important. And there are different sources of fat in nutrition. So we should avoid the saturated fatty acids and ultra-processed foods, let's say. And also we should avoid inflammation. And inflammation arises also by consuming sugars. And ultra-processed foods usually contains a lot of fats, saturated fatty acids, and sugar. So this is to be completely avoided. Then, if once a week you decide to eat a donut, no problem. The problem is if you eat a donut each day. So this is the trick. Then you should prefer unsaturated fatty acid. So, for example, fish, nuts, poultry, almonds, and so on, seeds. And so on, and also the olive oil, which is one of the best sources of good fats.
The Italian one, I can.
The Italian one, yeah, absolutely. Click here.
Sorry. I have some olive oil around the world. They don't look anything close to the Italian one.
Absolutely not.
Exactly.
Yeah, what I suggest to my athletes is to have 2 spoons of olive oil per lunch and per dinner, which is more or less 20 grams, considering that olive oil is 100% fat.
Yeah.
So here the trick is that when you eat some kind of food which is fatter than others, so for example salmon, you should lower the dose of olive oil. So let's say if your dose is 2 spoons per lunch, and you lunch with salmon and maybe avocado, for example, which is another fat food, you should reduce the amount of oil. So it's easy, you know.
Balancing sources of oils from different kind of food, you know, it's a smart choice. Okay, very interesting, very interesting.
May I, Francesco? Sorry, I was just introduce the argument with Elena. During the last year, some theories are reevaluating the saturated fat. Of course, not by processed foods. That's of course sure. But for example, from red meat, from eggs, and there are theories. For example, I also follow bodybuilding field. So there are theories of preps right now, of natural preps, of natural bodybuilding, of course, but they are reevaluating the use of saturated fats instead of unsaturated fats, with a bigger part of saturated respect of unsaturated. What do you think about, if you know something about the argument, and what do you think?
It depends from the source, let's say, because saturated fatty acids from eggs are strongly better than that from red meat, okay? Because the egg itself is a kind of food which is rich of vitamin D, minerals, other vitamins, and so on. So it always depends by the source of the food, and also on the quantity of times you eat that source of food during your week.
Of course, yes.
This is my experience so far. But yes, for example, eggs have been really evaluated in the last years, because there was the theory about cholesterol and so on, and there are a very large amount of studies demonstrating that if you have a dyslipidemia or hypertension or a metabolic syndrome, this is not the case. But for normal people, a huge amount of eggs during the week can lower the level of the bad cholesterol. So it's cardioprotective. So it's tricky. And here again, it is very important to evaluate the single situation rather than general situation.
Right. Thanks.
Oh, great. So I'm jumping on another, let's say, coach's issue that is connected with long seasons, many months of games and practicing. And usually, from my experience, when you're working on a team sport, it's easy to find after 3-4 months of season athletes that are suffering anemia. And like you can imagine, it takes time to balance again their values with medical supplements. So can nutrition provide some support in preventing the situation? If yes, how?
Yes, absolutely, yes. So you know that anemia can be the less number of red blood cells or the lower amount of hemoglobin. So it depends. The overall effect is that you are tired, you have asthenia, you reach with more difficulty your performance, and the most important thing is that your heart has an overload of work.
Yeah.
And this is the main reason why people and athletes suffering from anemia have some bad performances during the year. So, of course, nutrition can do something, but you should have a starting point. So, if you are following an athlete, an elite professional person, you should, for instance, start with the lab workout, demonstrating if there are some values to be followed up during the season. For example, hemoglobin, for example, red blood cells, hematocrit, and so on.
Just to let you know, usually in let's say normal professional teams, we do blood work every month, more or less.
Yeah.
But it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy to anticipate some reactions, because the problem is when you realize that your athletes are suffering of anemia, most of the time it's too late. So you gotta, bring something and give something to them, to anticipate this status of tiredness that they are suffering. So this is why I was thinking about to do something more than what we are usually doing.
Yeah, because it is a subtle problem, because you can have anemia because of microhemorrhages in the gastrointestinal tract when you do a strong effort. You can have some microhemorrhages from your feet when you're running. So it
jumping,
is
landing,
jumping, whatever. Then there is the important part regarding the female athletes, and then we can talk also about this. But from a nutritionist point of view, you can have your iron sources from animal food or from vegetables. So the iron coming from animal food is better, but in nutrition, it is important that you get the right amount of that kind of substance rather than from where you are taking it. So it's important to get the correct amount. It is not important if you are eating 2 kilos of lentils or you are eating 2 kilos of red meat. The important thing is that you get that amount in your nutrition.
So
and to avoid sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just anticipating another question.
And to avoid foods that can impair the absorption of iron. So, for example, tea, coffee, and cocoa can strongly impair the absorption of iron, whereas vitamin C, so oranges, lemons, and so on, can strengthen the absorption of iron.
Okay, this is why many products combine vitamin C with iron, just to facilitate the absorption. But he was mentioning about sources from vegetables and sources for meat. So my last question is in this direction, because I think it's becoming a more frequent situation that many coaches has to face, is how to support and advise the vegetarian or vegan athletes, what we should control to be sure that they are eating properly and they can be, professional athletes with this extreme approach to nutrition.
Okay, so it is not a problem to be vegetarian or vegan. And when I talk about this topic, I always think about Rich Roll, which is a mental coach and a ultramarathoner from US, and he was the typical American guy. So McDonald's and
burger.
Then one day he completely changed his mind and became vegan. And he's alive, and he does ultramarathons and so on. And so I think about him because it is a typical example. So, vegetarians can eat fish or doesn't eat fish and eats eggs and milk and so on. So it's quite difficult, but it is possible to work well with these people. The important things to evaluate mainly from a biochemical point of view is the vitamin B12, which is mainly present in animal sources and is totally absent from vegetables. So if you have a vegan athlete or a vegetarian doesn't eating meat, you should cyclically control the vitamin B12, because when you do a lab workout, you have the ranges of normal values, and typically you can have a normal value of vitamin B12, but it can be lower than that you need to have a good performance. So it is really important to have this value calculated. Then, as I told before, your body doesn't matter if you get proteins from vegetables or from animal sources. The important thing is to get the right amount for the activity you are doing or for the performance you are focusing on.
So it's possible to be athlete, also a pro athlete, being vegan or being vegetarian, but you have to be really committed. You have to check your body consistently, and knowing the ranges of vitamin B12 could be very important, to manage your nutrition in a proper way. So this is an important tip that we can give to our coaches, because it's becoming more frequent, having in our teams vegetarian athletes, and we gotta be able to manage also this kind of situation.
Yeah, this is a point.
Go ahead.
This is a point I got from a friend of mine, which is a physician and which is vegan. And a few years ago, I was always tired. I had asthenia. I had difficulties in training and so on. And I did a complete blood workout. Sorry. And she prescribed me also to check vitamin B12. And it seemed okay, because the value measured was in the range. But when I get my exams to my friend, she told me, no, absolutely not. You have a value in the range, but it is too low for the kind of sport activity and life you're having now. So she gave me an integration of vitamin B12, not all lifelong, just a couple of months. Mm-hmm. And in 2-3 weeks, I became normal again. So this is a tricky point.
To be honest, from my personal experience, all the vegetarian athletes that I got, they're really committed. They like to check their nutrition a proper way, and they are also open, to share their situation, to find solutions. So, it's not a big deal to manage vegetarian athletes, but you gotta control them properly, and so once in a while you gotta be able to advise them with the proper supplementation. This is my opinion, my experience, a proper approach. Alessandro, I don't know if you have any other question for Elena, because I know that you are running late with the time.
I would have thousands, but no, I would just like to introduce a little topic, and I don't know, it's my experience. I don't know if it's yours, Francesco, or yours, Elena. What I'm seeing during these years with my athletes population, okay, not with normal clients, I mean, but with athletes population, is that a lot of them, they are underestimating two things really important that we have talked about in part. The first is hydration. Hydration is underestimated by 99% of athletes that I have, and the second one is well, in general, they underestimate their needs of calories. I see a lot of athletes, they eat very few, and so, well, that's a problem, because we have talked about athletes overweight, no, we have to lower calories, but what I see with a lot of athletes, I need to push high the calories. So what's your experience?
Before giving voice to Elena, in my experience, like I said at the beginning, the total body water, the hydration, it's important. It's one of the main things to start, to talk with your athletes. So hydration is fundamental. It's one of the first data I want to collect from my athletes. About athletes underweight, happened to me, because when you're covering long seasons, it's not easy. Many athletes that are coming to play in Italy, they change completely their eating habits. And for example, American players coming in Italy, we know that our food is good, Mediterranean diet, whatever, but they have their own habits. So, and I have had athletes from many countries, from Russia, from north of Europe, from Africa. So it's not so easy to change habits in a few weeks, So I got some problems about athletes underweight. Once again, in my opinion, body composition became a fundamental assessment for any athletes. Okay, for professional athletes, it's must have. We are doing body composition once a month, or most of the time, every 2 months. We don't go over 2 months of evaluating our athletes. But from body composition, you can really touch many aspects of being professional athletes, because you start with a lifestyle. After you go on nutrition, you go on training load, you go on recovery status. Elena mentioned about inflammation. So I can talk about stress, for example. So body composition became a fundamental assessment for professional athletes. I don't know, what do you think about it?
So the very first thing I do with my people is, and these are the first 2 steps I get, is the first, a nutritional diary, which I send to people a few days before the first contact with them. Because what I saw in the last years is that more or less every one of us has not a correct perception of the intake of the day. So maybe I think I'm eating well, and maybe I am eating 3,000 calories per day, because I eat only pasta, bread, pizza, and so on, which are foods with a high density in terms of calories. Then there are a few people who are sure to eat well, and have an intake of 1,200 calories per day, which is absolutely wrong for an athlete. So this is the first thing. The second thing important for the nutritional diary is that I get information about the habits. And Francesco, you mentioned that it is difficult to change habits, and several studies demonstrated that it takes more or less 66 days to change a habit. And you have to do the same thing for at least, in median, 66 days to get a new habit. There is a fabulous book about this, and the name is The Power of Habit or something like that. I think it's interesting to study it. And the other thing is hydration. So what I suggest to my people is to drink at least 1 liter of beverages each 30 kilograms of weight. So, for example, I am 60 kilograms and I drink at least 2 liters of water, let's say, per day. When I train, for example, during summer, I measure my body weight, so not my body composition, just my body weight before and after training. And last year, which we had a really hot summer here in Milan, there was a day where I lost 2.5 kilograms in 90 minutes of training. So in that day, I knew that I had to drink 2 liters plus 2.5 liters again. In order to avoid.
We are doing this strategy also with the athletes during, let's say, before summer, during the playoffs. So let's say during post-season or during training camp, try to create this awareness about hydration. So they count the amount of water after practice. So we take body weight before and after, and we prepare some glasses of water to drink during practice to anticipate the hydration, so they can start drinking a little bit before practice and sipping water during practice. Because you cannot drink 1 liter of water during a game, for example. So create to drink exactly continuously. Because most of the time when you are looking for water, you're thirsty, it's too late. So you gotta be able to anticipate this dehydration, before that is coming.
Yeah.
So very interesting point. Okay, Elena, like I say, I'm begging you to be our guest for another time at least. So I can anticipate to Alessandro, this is our first episode. We're going to plan the second one with Elena because, nutrition is such a great topic, it's such a huge topic. And I'm sure that our listeners are very, very interested on making a deep dive in this topic with some other questions. So once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Francesco and Alessandro.
So clear and so detailed. So once again, I owe you one, like we say. So hopefully we got a chance to share other situation together. I'm sure that with the ASICS runners, we're gonna have this kind of chance. So once again, thank you, and I cross my finger so we can find time and for another episode. Once again, speaking about nutrition with Elena.
I would be happy to do that. So I'm here.
Okay. Thank you again, also from me, Elena. Thank you, Francesco. Well, have a good night. Bye from Alessandro, the Performance Lab staff. We'll see the next episode.